Okay, ladies and gentlemen, this is part number 8 of the Ark of the Covenant by Michael Fazio. And all of this, I want you to know, is discussed in my book. However, I am not an author, and it might be a little bit jumbled the way I word it in my book, because I speak about these things in the book itself in the same fashion I speak about it here. I did not have the money or the ability to write a book in a professional manner. So those of you who read it, forgive me my ignorance. Now, moving back to the topic of George Washington being what is represented on the $1 bill as the Alpha and the Omega, there were some things I didn't have time to discuss in part number 7. So let's go over them quickly. The first thing I didn't have time to discuss in part number 7 is the fact that George Washington is the first president which we know. Therefore, George Washington is the Alpha. Now, the reason that I say George Washington is the Alpha because he's the first president. I also said that this is an Omega symbol that surrounds George Washington. And that Omega symbol represents the end of an era. So he is the Alpha and the Omega. However, he is represented as the Alpha and the Omega in another mannerism. When George Washington, that represents the beginning of the United States of America, was placed upon the $1 bill, he was the first president to be placed on the $1 bill. And you know that all the other bills have been changed except the $1 bill. And they didn't do that because, like I've said, this race of beings, or this entity that formed all of these pictographs 7,000 years ago, this is part of the plan that follows through like a Steven Spielberg movie script. It doesn't make a difference whether or not you believe it. That's the truth. Now, if George Washington was the first president placed on the $1 bill, when they remove George Washington or the $1 bill, he will have been the last president, aka the Alpha and the Omega. Now, these symbols 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4 that are represented on the candy canes on the top above George Washington's eyes on both sides, those numbers 44 don't only just coincide with the dimension of the plateau at the top of the Great Pyramid. These numbers 44 represent something else that no one has ever seen before, and I have only published in my book, and that is, in fact, those numbers coincide with this angle. This angle here that is represented at this line, which is not a solid white stripe, this line here and this line here is 44 degrees. Now, they did this for a reason, and I can't tell you why they did it or even how they did it. All I can tell you is that when I used these tools to design things for the Air Force, and I was not in the Air Force, I worked on the A-10A project, but when I worked on jig modification on the A-10A project at Fairchild Industries, I learned about mechanical drawing in high school to get my A&P license, but when I learned how to use those tools, I learned that mechanical drawing is a very precise science. And they do things that you don't necessarily see or understand when they're creating something, so that at the end of the project it comes to fruition that it fits together like machine parts. So this number here, 44, is a representation of 44 again at the top. Now, moving past this representation, which is the Alpha, George Washington, and the Omega, we're going to show you something else about the Alpha and the Omega on the reverse of the $1 bill that I didn't point out in the last video, and I didn't realize it until I went over it. This particular symbol right here aka the Alpha, or the pyramid, and the A, which is a representation of the Alpha itself. This Alpha is represented in the God pod. And I call it a pod because it is a seed that represents the beginning of life on earth. There is also one more thing I would like to discuss with you about these seed pods, aka the God pod and the evil seed of death. They are not round. Neither one of these two pods is round, which is a reason that I call them a pod, because a seed is not round. Some seeds can be round by chance, but typically a seed is oval shaped. And the God pod and the evil seed of death is not round by approximately 1/64 of an inch. And there's a reason for that as well, and that is discussed in great detail inside the volume of my book. So moving back to the Alpha, which is represented as the A, or the Great Pyramid, the eagle represents the Omega. Once again, I'm going to flip this over and I'm going to show you another way in which the eagle, or the evil seed of death, represents the Omega. And even though it's not as crystal clear as the Omega symbol around George Washington, this wing structure that is formed by the inverted eagle's wings, the wing structure that is formed by the inverted eagle's wings, the wing structure that is formed by the inverted eagle's wings is in fact a pretty close representation of an Omega symbol. This is a pretty close representation of an Omega symbol in respect to the fact that it could represent an Omega symbol. However, the Indian chief, which is a representation of war per se, and the POTUS, which is the 44th POTUS, which I have repeatedly said is going to be responsible for not one but two nuclear detonations, and in fact has been responsible for 2 nuclear detonations. This Indian chief that sets over the glory, which is not a glory, in fact it's a nuclear detonation, this Indian chief, which is the Commander-in-Chief of the United States of America, and a representation of the Commander-in-Chief of the United States of America, in that the nuclear detonations that have occurred on Obama's watch are now connected, at least metaphorically speaking, to the Commander-in-Chief, or the Indian Chief, or the Commander-in-Chief of the United States of America. Therefore, the bough of olive branch and the arrows, which was the original methodology in which to kill peoples, no longer holds the power that it once did, and the new methodology for the Commander-in-Chief, who is now Barack Hussein Obama, is nuclear energy. And if you don't think the energy coming from Fukushima is going to kill millions of people, all you have to do is wait 20 or 25 years and see how it reduces the sperm count in this population of the entire world in order to have male children, which they want more female children than male children for whatever reason. So this nuclear detonation is the new methodology. The Omega symbol is what could be represented as the wings, and this is the Alpha, again, being the Great Pyramid. Now I'm going to show you a different pictograph, which is one of my favorites actually, and this pictograph is a picture of the Ark of the Covenant with a few little creatures that I made that look like little angels. And these are denoted in my Proof of God video, part 1 and part 2. These are the two creatures. One is folded in one methodology and one is folded in the other. However, one of my favorite pictures is also in this pictograph. This is one of the most favorite pictures I have that I possess, because this picture, as you can see and is well denoted in this pictograph, has a picture of the angel facing to the left and the angel facing to the right. Now, when you turn this slightly this way, the airplane falls off of there, but you can denote this face facing this way, and you can denote this face facing this way. However, this is the face that represents an Egyptian face, or pharaoh. It does so because the Egyptian face is similar in nature to this. However, when you turn this upside down, in my series of pictographs called $1 Gods, or Gods of Zolocraft, they're in several different places. When you turn this